Margaret Albright loved her morning walks. At 68 years old, the retired school librarian enjoyed the peace and routine. She often strolled down Sycamore Lane. Her constant companion on these walks was Rex, her loyal German bulldog. But Rex wasn't just any dog, he was a retired U.S. Army canine, trained for missions most people couldn't even imagine. Though Margaret rarely mentioned his military past, Rex carried himself with an unmistakable air of authority. One autumn afternoon, Margaret tugged gently on Rex's leash as they walked down the quiet street. She hummed softly, unaware of the two figures watching her from across the street. Dressed in black hoodies and sneakers, Marcus and Trey had been scoping out the neighborhood for hours. They weren't hardened criminals, just desperate men looking for quick cash. Margaret seemed like an easy target, an elderly woman walking alone, a purse likely tucked away in her coat pocket. "She'll never see it coming," Marcus muttered to Trey. Trey nodded, his hands stuffed in his pockets. As Margaret rounded the corner onto a less crowded street, Marcus and Trey moved quickly and crossed the road. Margaret had just reached the edge of a small park when she felt a sudden tug on her shoulder. "Hand over your purse, lady," Marcus growled. Margaret froze. Her heart sank as she looked at the men, their faces partially obscured by their hoodies. Before she could respond, Trey reached for her purse. With a sharp bark that echoed through the street, the German bulldog lunged forward. The leash slipped from Margaret's hand as Rex positioned himself between her and the attackers. His growl was deep and menacing, a sound that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "Back off, dog!" Trey yelled, raising his arm in a futile attempt to scare Rex. Rex didn't back off. He launched himself at Trey, clamping down on the sleeve of his hoodie. Trey screamed, stumbling backward and falling onto the pavement. Marcus tried to intervene, grabbing a stick from the ground, but Rex turned his attention to him, snarling and snapping. The two men were no match for the well-trained canine. Within moments, Trey had scrambled to his feet and bolted down the street, clutching his arm. Marcus hesitated, but Rex barked again, advancing with unrelenting focus. Marcus dropped the stick and took off running after his friend. Margaret stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. When Rex returned to her side, he was wagging his tail as if nothing had happened. Margaret knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Good boy, Rex," she whispered with a trembling voice. "You saved me." Unbeknownst to Margaret, the entire incident had been captured by a security camera mounted on a nearby building. It wasn't long before the footage made its way to the local police department. The next morning, Margaret sat on her living room couch, sipping tea and stroking Rex's fur. She had barely slept after the incident, replaying the terrifying encounter in her mind. Despite her unease, she felt immense gratitude for Rex. Without him, things could have ended very differently. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Jenna Parker sat in her small office at the Sycamore County Police Department. She'd been scrolling through security footage from a local bakery when another officer burst in. "You've got to see this, Jenna," he said, holding up his phone. "What is it?" Jenna asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's from the street cam on Sycamore Lane. You won't believe what this dog did." Jenna took the phone and watched intently. The video showed an elderly woman being confronted by two men before a large German bulldog sprang into action. The dog's precision and bravery were remarkable, and Jenna couldn't help but smile as the robbers fled. "Let's find out who owns that dog," Jenna said. By midday, the police had identified Margaret and paid her a visit. Jenna arrived at the cozy brick house and was greeted by Rex, who stood guard at the front door. Though his eyes were watchful, his tail wagged slightly as Jenna extended her hand. "He's protective but sweet," Margaret said as she opened the door. "Come on in." Jenna stepped inside, noting the photos of family members and framed certificates lining the walls. After a brief chat, Margaret explained Rex's background. "He served with the army for years," Margaret said, patting Rex's head. When he retired, they asked if I wanted to adopt him. Best decision I ever made. Well, he's a hero, Jenna replied. The video of what happened is already making rounds at the station. We're working on tracking those men down, but I just wanted to stop by and let you know how impressed we are. Margaret smiled, feeling a swell of pride. Thank you, Officer Parker. Rex is my guardian angel. Later that afternoon, the police released the video to the local news. By evening, Rex was the talk of Sycamore County. Neighbors who had rarely spoken to Margaret stopped by to check on her and meet the famous dog. Is this the hero we've been hearing about? Asked Mr. Douglas, her neighbor from across the street. He sure is, Margaret said, chuckling as Rex greeted Mr. Douglas with a friendly sniff. While the community celebrated Rex's bravery, the police were busy hunting down Marcus and Trey. Using footage from nearby stores, they tracked the two men to a dingy motel on the outskirts of town. At 11 p.m., officers surrounded the building. Marcus and Trey were caught off guard as police stormed their room. They were arrested without a fight and brought to the station for questioning. Looks like your little stunt didn't work out, Jenna said as she processed the two men. That dog did a better job stopping you than we could have. By the next morning, the news of their arrest had spread, and Margaret received another visit from the police. We'd like to honor Rex for his courage, Jenna explained. He deserves recognition for saving a life. Margaret nodded, tears welling in her eyes. The following weekend, the Sycamore County Police Department held a special ceremony in the town square. Word had spread far and wide, and a small crowd gathered to celebrate the town's newest hero. Local businesses donated refreshments, and the mayor himself arrived to give a speech. Margaret stood proudly at the front of the crowd, holding Rex's leash. The German bulldog sat calmly beside her, his ears perked up as he surveyed the scene. He didn't seem fazed by the applause or flashing cameras, just another mission to him. Officer Jenna Parker stepped up to the podium. Today, we recognize a truly remarkable act of courage, she began. When two criminals threatened the safety of one of our citizens, this brave dog stepped in without hesitation. Rex didn't just protect Margaret Albright, he reminded us all what loyalty and bravery look like. The crowd erupted into cheers as Jenna crouched down to present Rex with a shiny medal attached to a blue ribbon. Margaret leaned forward to help fasten it around his neck. Rex tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled by all the fuss, but his wagging tail showed he enjoyed the attention. Rex, on behalf of Sycamore County, we thank you, Jenna said, giving him a firm pat on the head. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Kindly subscribe for more thrilling stories. Like and share this video. Have a nice day.